I'm Vivi. I'm the founder and CEO of Blackbullion. Hopefully many of you know me by now. If you don't, you can probably hear my voice from wherever you are, all the way up in Bristol or Edinburgh. I'm not a quiet person. I'm going to hand over with much pleasure and honor the reins over to the fabulous Lynne Condell. Lynne, over to you.
Oh, that was a very nice introduction, Vivi. Thank you very much. So I've got the lovely job of chairing today's session, which we're going to do a bit of a Q&A discussion panel around working with applicants, because this time of year, I know we've been busy working with applicants probably since Christmas, but particularly now we're getting to the summer, everything ramps up, and it's certainly the right time to be talking to students and applicants about money. So really delighted we've got Vivi on the panel, obviously, and we've got Dr. Dominique Thompson, Dr. Dom. So do you want to introduce yourself, Dom?
Oh, yes. Hello. So Dom Thompson, GP by background, but now working with lots of universities in the space of student mental health and wellbeing generally. I have written 5 little books called the Student Wellbeing Series, which are to help students at university or getting ready for uni. I've written a book for parents called How to Grow a Grown Up, about understanding your teen in the 21st century and how to get them ready for university or life after school. And I do lots and lots of projects looking at student mental health. I do touch on student suicide, do quite a lot of reviews of those. So I do a whole variety of stuff and get out and about. And some of you may have heard me speak before. And I'm actually going to NASMA, which is a financial type thing, I'm told, which is coming to my own hometown of Bristol, and I'm speaking there next week. So you'll hear me again. So yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Well, NASMA are very lucky to have you. I used to be the chair of NASMA a long time ago, so I'm sure you'll be a fabulous speaker. For those of you that have got a spare 15 or 20 minutes, have a look at Dom's TED Talks, because I really enjoyed them. Yeah, very good, thank you. And also on our panel, we've got the illustrious Phil Bakstad, who you told me this morning he sounds like Barry White. Do you want to introduce yourself, Phil?
Morning, yeah. Thanks, Lynn. It's nice to see you, and thanks for inviting me to be on the panel. So my name's Phil Bakstad. I work at Liverpool John Moores University. I'm Associate Dean for Diversity and Inclusion, which sounds very grand, but actually just means that I do lots of different things around student inclusion. A lot of my work has been in supporting our care experienced and estranged students with care and responsibilities. Lots of the groups that we've been talking about in the sector for a while. At JMU, we were very lucky. Well, I had quite a good boss for many years at JMU, we were very lucky that the university were really keen, that we were really proactive in terms of identifying support that our students might benefit from when they belong to these cohorts. Just as a bit of a caveat, I have got COVID, possibly for the first time, so I'm actually off work sick at the moment, but I can do this. So apologies if you're not getting me at my best today. But I'm not at my best basically, but I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, Phil. Your not best is certainly better than most other people, so we're lucky to have you. So thank you for getting out your sick bed. Okay, so if everyone's happy, shall we begin with the questions and see how we get on? And please do put any questions in the chat, and Danielle and the Blackbullion team will be looking at them, picking any questions out. Okay, thanks. So I think the first question, really, we'll say very generally to start off, is about what different support do applicants need compared with university students. So Dom, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we need to take into account how different life is now from a few years ago for our mainly younger generation. About 70% of students are actually 18 to 24, although not all, I recognise that. And for those young people, they have had, as we all know, a really bumpy time. And I think getting ready for what is probably an even bigger transition than it would have been, you know, pre-pandemic, is something that we do need to help them more with than perhaps we did before. So my feeling is that if we focus on a couple of areas, making sure that they're ready for independent life. Being independent sounds really obvious, but if you've just been sort of basically stuck at home, you know, with your family, you perhaps haven't had to be as independent, yet probably haven't been on a gap year because they seem to have fallen out of favour. So all of those things around making your own decisions, having the confidence to try new things, those sorts of things have not happened as much. So that's probably one big thing, is like helping them to think about that independence and the decisions they're going to need to make. And the other thing is anxiety. We really need to be conscious of the fact that anxiety has spiked massively over lots of different topics, but we just generally have an extremely anxious demographic coming to university now. I mean, when I talked to the residency staff at their conference about a month ago, they just said, you know, basically just all the first years are just, loads of them are just crying all the time. It's just heartbreaking. They're just so stressed about everything, and that obviously money features very near the top of that. But the other thing is the making friends, it's the connections. So I know we're going to talk about money and financial well-being, which is one of the probably 2 or 3 most important things for them. But I do think making friends and connections is the other thing we need to help them to think about how they're going to do that, and maybe create activities that they can do that through. So I'll stop talking for a bit, but you know, as you probably can all realize, I can talk about this stuff all day, so I'll shut up now.
I think no, please don't. I think that it's something that we can all talk about all day, because there's so much to talk about. And I think making those activities to connect as free and as accessible to all is obviously really important, isn't it? That the costs need to be kept to a minimum. Vivi, I know you've got lots of things that you probably want to talk about on this topic.
I have lots of things I want to talk about on all topics, but I think echoing, if I flow on from what Dom was saying, and I couldn't agree more. And Dom and I've had the pleasure and the privilege of sharing many a panel now with Dom. But I think if I can take it slightly onto the money side, because it is the practical thing that we know is, I don't want to say easier to solve, but there's more of a playbook. And one of the things that I'm really keen on in all facets of life is trying to mitigate the things that we know we can mitigate, so that it leaves capacity and mental space to deal with things like making friends, which there's far less of a playbook and it's far less predictable. So if we can remove some of the money stress, then it leaves capacity to be able to look more at the things that follow less of a traditional kind of step-by-step paint by numbers solution. And so my answer to the question, which hopefully it kind of dovetails with what Dom is saying, is to get these young people of ours who are simultaneously massively resilient, haven't gotten through COVID and haven't gotten through the chaos of the school system and the rest of it at the time, but at the same time are suffering from major anxiety, from climate, money, friends, mental health, and the rest. How can we get them to understand how to make their money last, how to budget, how much is coming in, how much is going out, encourage early conversations with parents and guardians. A lot of families are very uncomfortable talking about money. Cost of living crisis is not a student crisis, it's a national crisis. A lot of parents have got challenges on their financials now. So having those conversations early, teaching kids how to cook. Anyone who's been on a session with me, I keep banging on about this. It's the easiest way to save money is to cook it at home instead of buying crappy takeaways, and just enabling people to have the language to talk about money. So if they're in difficulty, they can ask. And if we can solve or mitigate some of those challenges, it leaves them a lot more mental capacity for making friends, managing their mental health, and learning independent living.
Thanks, Vivi. I think, Phil, I know that there'll be lots more questions further down the line that are probably that you're going to talk in greater detail about, but lots of the people that you work with, the applicants particularly, haven't got support of families. So I was just thinking, is there anything you'd want to come in with around the vulnerable students?
I mean, the joke that we always used to say in the office that we share one mind hasn't gone away, has it really? Because I was just thinking that I know what I need to say on this. I think you're right, and you know, the vast majority of our students will be coming to university with, with some kind of family support. On the flip side, those who are coming from independent living, whether that's whether that's the care sector or some kind of other independent setup, they may be quite skilled actually at making what little finances they've got, what meager finances they've had to last. I think that the issue now is, and they can be really, really good at that. And certainly some of my students, I said to them, do you want to sit down and do a bit of a budget? They'd look at me and say, I've been living on universal credit since I was 16. There's nothing that you need to teach me about making my money last, and that's absolutely fine. I think that, like you said before, Vivi, like the cost of living thing is that unfortunately with student finance hasn't gone up massively and everything else has. So it's finding that balance at the moment of how to make what you've got go even further, and that's where I think that the issue is at the moment, is that we haven't seen an increase in statutory funding, and we are seeing more and more students come and say, I can't do this, even with the best of intentions, I can't make what I've got last until my next payday.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's very true. And I know we've talked at length at other Blackbullion webinars about how students really should have had something like an 18% pay rise this year, and instead they got 2% or something ridiculous. Yeah. So I think we're getting to the point now where really we should possibly, and I know universities don't like this language, to talk about the student finance is a contribution towards university as opposed to paying for everything. But no, thank you. So we'll move on to question 2. I've got absolutely loads of questions, so I know we won't get through them all, but let's see how we crack on. How can universities proactively assist students in developing and maintaining good financial habits before they start? So how do you find those that are the most vulnerable or those that need the most support? So maybe Phil, do you want to start with that? How we identify those that need help the most?
Yeah, no problem. I think that in terms of the students that I work with most regularly, we've found that identifying those students early on, to be quite honest, normally is through our accommodation booking processes. Students that we don't have kind of like a long-standing working relationship with, so whether they've been referred in by an external third party, we're finding students who are contacting our accommodation office, and number one, because they're looking to book accommodation, can't get a guarantor, for example, or on the flip side of it, are struggling to get their student finance assessed as an independent student. So that's how we tend to pick people up on the fly, as it was. But I think that where we've been quite lucky at John Moores is that a lot of our external facing work has, for a long time, we've been able to go out and work with local partners so that we can have those conversations really early on and be realistic with people about what they can afford while they're studying, because it's if you want to go and live in really lovely accommodation but you can't afford the rent, then you're putting yourself in a hardship immediately on you. I think the other side of things as well is, universities, we've got lots and lots of data about our students, so we know who our students are, and that goes down right into the really granular demographic stuff, and we can trend that, can't we? So we know that students from particular postcode areas, we can look at their engagement, and we can look at what some of the issues that they might face, and so we can once we've done that analysis of data, we can then start to go back and target that a bit more appropriately, can't we, pre-entry, and talk to students from particular cohorts to make sure that they're getting the right information, because all of the information is there, isn't it? So I think we can't just wait for people to come to us and expect everything to be fixed straight away. Then, can we?
No. I mean, that's very.
It's a long-winded answer. Sorry.
No, it's not at all, because actually the data that we do have very rich data, but often we don't use it for these purposes. I just wonder, Dom, did you want to come in on anything there around that question?
I mean, it's always difficult, isn't it, when before they've arrived, you've got a few limited, ways to contact them. Although some of that could be via social media, which I do think is always a really good option to get messaging that's quite simple out to them before they arrive. I think maybe even very early as they arrive, it would potentially be worth, and this may already be happening. Remember, this isn't my specific area of expertise, but I do wonder if we're talking to our academic colleagues enough so that as they welcome them into lectures for the first time and they're kind of getting them used to, you know, a different way of learning and so on, to mention the support services that are available, including financial advice and support. I wonder if that's just another way to get that message in, you know, from Freshers Week onwards, really.
Yeah, definitely a whole university approach to money management, financial well-being is definitely needed so that it's everybody's responsibility, I think. Vivi, did you have a thought that you wanted to come in on?
I just wanted to say that the more information we can give people, the better. The earlier we give, the better. I obviously concur with what Phil's saying in terms of, you know, in a lot of places, there is the data to be able to at least reach out and have the conversations. I think we are also have to acknowledge that young people also need the information to make decisions for themselves. And I think and I say this with love for the sector, there isn't always accurate information about the genuine, actually fully costed cost of going to university. So it's something we mentioned at the workshop. We're starting to put out what we're calling student inflation data, and we'll be sharing that with the network broadly soon. Students actually have higher inflation than other people in the country because of the idiosyncrasies of the way inflation is calculated. Food inflation runs at about 17-18%. Headline inflation is 8%. That gap is not being spoken about. And so really advising students that toilet paper costs money and food costs money and transport costs money. And if you want to stay in a nice place, you're going to have less money for food. And that is just the financial reality that we all live within. So providing better headline information about a fully costed week and month and term so that they can see that the money they get in from student finance is or isn't going to be enough, and what is that shortfall. In terms of covering that shortfall, we're going to be banging on a lot more about scholarships and bursaries. We're trying to do our part to raise the pot of money as well. So as Phil said, sometimes there just isn't enough. No matter how much you cut, there just isn't enough. We have to look at the earning side as well. We don't want students doing 3 jobs. That's not good for their mental health. It's not good for their academic results. But there are increasing pots of other monies, whether university money or external money. Students can't always find it. So as a very practical thing, have a look at your university's funding, and are the physics scholarships and the biology scholarships on different pages, or is everything centralized and easy to find? So like really granular, practical stuff that you can do right from the beginning.
Oh, I was on mute then. Schoolgirl error. So what do we think we should tell students at different times in the year? So is it always the same message, or should we break it down? I mean, it's a bit like a calendar, isn't it? A calendar of advice and guidance, and how we break that down from applicants to current students, that transition period. Who'd like to start on? Who'd like to start on that? Who's got thoughts on that? Vivi, I can tell she's there. She's dead keen, as always.
I'm happy to pass to Phil, and then I'll go after Phil. Guests pleasure.
Yeah. Okay, go on then, Phil.
Thanks, Vivi. I mean, I think you're right. There's a timeline to everything, isn't there? And I think that, you know, and that will differ for each institution as well. I mean, I do think I agree with what everyone said so far, is that we can't actually wait until students arrive with us to say, this is, you know, let's work out your budget now. So a lot of the pre-entry stuff, and whether that's in terms of, you know, I know a lot of institutions do online induction or onboarding now. And we're looking at doing some residential pre-induction activities this year. Actually, that's too late. That's too late. People need to be starting to work out what their budgets are when they're booking their accommodation. But then it does go from there. So, I mean, if we're looking at the timeline for student finance, I mean, my experience will say that normally by about November time, students are starting, that first semester, students start to run out of money already by then if they've not planned properly. So we need to be doing something then about, you know, are you caught short? Maybe unfortunate turn of phrase, but you know, what do we need to be doing then? looking at, I mean, and again, this will vary for city on city. You know, when would you be looking to book your accommodation? One of the things that we find in Liverpool, we've got 4 universities, and there's a massive rush in this November and December. People are scared of not getting accommodation for next year, so people book themselves into very expensive private rented accommodation. So some of the messaging about there is no rush to get your accommodation, make sure that you've got all your funding sorted for next year before you do anything. But that pre-Christmas thing is really important. And then obviously don't forget to apply for your student finance as well come March time, because also that issue that we always pick up again in September is, oh, I didn't realise that I had to reapply. So they'd be my 3 suggestions certainly, but I'll defer to Vivi.
Vivi?
You don't need to defer to me. But I agree with all of that. And one of the things I've always liked about Dom's books is the parental element or guardian element, if we can just bucket, you know, the people who are responsible for our young people, let's just bucket them all together. But I think I agree with what Phil is saying about the earlier we need to start, the better. Again, I think we can never over communicate. I think some cities have enough housing, and I agree you don't need this kind of rush for housing, but we do know that there are some cities and towns across the UK where there is a desperate shortage of housing, and if those people are not queuing up in line at 5 a.m, they're not going to get a place to stay. So it is a bit of a tale of multiple, you know, there's multiple tales happening across the country. We've been producing sort of money ready for university content to get people in early, but I think actually this is where the only source of information really is parents and guardians, because we as a sector are not touching them, so to speak, early enough. And schools, as much as we'd all love for schools to be doing this, they just don't have the capacity, and sometimes I would argue they don't have the knowledge. So I think this is where parents, guardians and the rest really have a huge role to play. I don't know, Dom, if you agree or disagree with that, but that would be my thinking.
Yeah, I mean, obviously my, as you say, I mentioned parents, guardians and so on a lot because I want them to build the independence rather than do it for the young person. And it's always that influence. I think the question of the fact that university is seasonal, and I think what a lot of new applicants and people arriving don't realize or haven't thought about the fact that their costs will vary, and that in fact just spelling out something really simple, and you could start with the things that maybe feel a bit less scary in terms of, rather than think about housing and you know the big money, just think, you know, when you first arrive you might want to budget for, you know, trips home or freshers week, welcome week. You might want to budget for exam takeaways. You might, or you know, probably shouldn't cook for yourself, but the point is there are these seasonal costs that I think students can visualize and think, oh yeah, I see what you mean. Yes, so it's going to go up and down. There are going to be different things I need to think about. And then you weave that in with some of the other bigger ones that can feel a bit overwhelming. You know, you might say at the beginning, you're going to need a little bit maybe to join some clubs and societies. And then, you know, towards the end of the year, you might be thinking more about, you know, restocking the bank balance with a job. And it's that seasonality. They can get their head around it, and then you can build in some of the bigger things that they need to achieve.
Yeah, there's definitely lots of stuff in the chat about the accommodation rush. As we said, I mean, we know it's been in the national media about some student cities, and obviously when you see that in the national news, that is going to generate even more it's going to unsettle even more people, even from those that are already sorted for their accommodation. It's like the worried well, isn't it? You know, and everybody will become anxious about it, unfortunately. And there's something else in the chat, and I know the Blackbullion team are looking at, but I know when we were talking about how we identify people that need additional support, and Phil was talking about, you know, we've got lots of data. We in our advice teams, we've got lots of data because we know which courses that we get lots of queries on. So, for example, we know you get lots of queries from students that are going on placement because they don't understand how they're funded. We know we get lots of students that are on healthcare courses because they're often a bit more mature. They've often got children. Students that are starting on foundation years are often more mature, so they may come to university with I don't know, pre-existing debts or pre-existing financial commitments. So we do know, aside from the data, that these are groups of students that will need extra support on a lot of levels. Someone else has just put in the chat, sorry, and we'll carry on with the questions about money. Financial capability should be taught at home when school, but for HE applicants, UCAS has good info. So bursaries and scholarships. So financial capability is supposed to be on the national curriculum, and I suppose that would be another good topic for a webinar on a different day, because we know that it's taught maybe a couple of lessons over the year, and it's about topics that really are not that relevant to young people. And again, it's putting the onus back on teachers, isn't it? To do everything that's wrong with society. So speaking as the parent of a teacher, it's like they're expected to pick up all the gaps of everything that's wrong in society, when there just isn't time, is there? Anyway, we'll come back to that. So question 4 I've got here. I've got about 200 questions and we're on question 4. So maybe we'll be here till tomorrow. What one piece of money advice would you give a young person who just finished their A-levels and was going to start university? Who'd like to start with that? Dom, would you like to start with that? Because it might not be straight financial, it might be something else. So interesting perspective.
I think it is important for them to have a piece of money advice that they can hold in their minds, but I do worry that I would end up being oversimplistic, because it feels like it's actually, it's a complicated topic. So I don't want to be oversimplistic. So I might either say something like, a good like a life message is don't spend what you haven't got. But I also think we have to raise their awareness. So beware of peer pressure. They kind of tie up actually, but you see a lot of students, they're suddenly in with a whole new crowd, flatmates they didn't know before, on their course, and they're going to be people there with lots of different backgrounds, and there can be that pressure to, we're all going out every night, we're all going to go for food, or and everybody's coming from different financial backgrounds, and there could be that peer pressure, because of course their key thing is they want to make friends. That is still the number one concern for students. So I think peer pressure is probably the thing that I would flag up to them as just try and be aware of that and not get dragged in when you don't have to.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, because peer pressure is a very big thing for young people generally. Well, not just young people, is it? But particularly when you're young. And I also think that is often where a lot of them get into a financial difficulty. I know when my children were going to university, and I know I'm not even on the panel, I used to tell them to practice saying, oh, no, thank you. I'm doing this tonight, not washing my hair, because that was a rubbish one, but just practice and saying, oh, that sounds lovely, I'll maybe join you later, or so you've got something in your head to say when you get asked out, because they want to go to things, they want to belong. Vivi, what would be your tip?
It's so funny you say that about your kids. So in V1 of Blackbullion, which I think very few people were in our community at that point, we had a little white lie download, which I thought was brilliant, but we have since removed it because people don't like the idea of pushing lies. But it would say things like, I'm on antibiotics, I'll come out, but I can't drink because I'm on antibiotics. Or, and it is because, as both of you ladies have said, people want to go out with friends. We all want to go out with friends, and peer pressure is a global phenomena that happens to every single person on the planet. We now call them influencers. It used to just be called peer pressure. Now it's called influencers. But the ability to go out but not spend as much money. And most people up to a certain age won't just say, I can't afford it, or I'm skint. And so giving people the ability to say, I'm on antibiotics, my wallet got stolen, like all of these little white lies. It was a very popular download. Now we have the kind of digital version, which is our money confessions, which is happening this week. The last campaign we ran a few weeks ago, there's 230 submissions from students in the first day or the first 2 days of students sharing the things that they have done. And it is often buying things that you didn't want to and spending money where you didn't want to. So if there's one piece of advice, it is very much how much do you have coming in, how much do you have going out, what is the difference between the two, and if the difference is too large, where can you find a gap for that? And if you are able to work summers, there are a lot of jobs out there at the moment. Students don't necessarily always want to work these kinds of jobs, but many of us started our academic careers working in coffee shops and working in, you know, retail. I mean, this is just, you know, a nice, easy way. The gig economy, we're going to be producing a whole chunk of content about how to make more money in your spare time, gig economy, freelancing, you know, creator economy, all of these kinds of things. But if you can get to grips on how much is coming in, how much is going out, and what the gap is, then you are infinitely more knowledgeable than many students on campus. So that would be the first conversation that I would have. By the way, on the school side, we're not going to change that anytime soon. It's just not a government priority at all. The average school right now is delivering 1 hour per year of what they are classifying as financial education. The government has way too many priorities, not to mention now a slight crisis with what's happening with our former PM. This simply isn't going to be resolved. So we need to look at things that don't involve government coming to help, because they're not going to.
No, and I know when financial capability, I mean, there was a huge celebration, wasn't there, around financial capability getting on the national curriculum. And I do remember Martin Lewis being very excited about it. But then I think it was about a year later when there was a review by the teaching or one of the teaching unions about how teachers don't feel financially capable. So, you know, a lot of them didn't feel confident enough to deliver lessons on, and obviously it would always be the maths teachers, wouldn't it, for because it's a math, we still say it's a math thing. I know we don't, but it's about how they didn't feel confident to deliver it. So it's no wonder young people, and again, I know we're generalising about young people, it's no wonder they're arriving at university not feeling financially prepared, because you know, student finance is probably done either at 20 minutes after school one night or not at all in a lot of cases. So Phil, have you got a tip or a tip that you'd like to pass on to your students?
Always. I think back to the first day of term when we had an institutional induction event, and we saw a chap come in with 2 massive Vivi and Westwood bags, and we spoke to him at the time and said, totted all of this up and said, how much do you think this, how much does this come to? He told us, we said, you're going to need this money in a couple of weeks, go and take it all back now. And he did actually, and we saw him a couple of weeks later, and he said, thanks for that, because I've run out already. I mean, I don't think that in terms of tips for students, there's anything that I would add to what Dom and Vivi have already said, because I'm really conscious now that, like you said, about influences, and I'm obviously showing my age now in terms of this aspirational element of higher education, is that when I'm going to come here, this is what it's going to look like, and this is how I'm going to look, and this is everything that I'm going to need to have this life. It is very different, and we're navigating it in a different way now. I think that universities need to be upfront and say this, you know, in terms of our marketing, this is, you are coming to study at a university. Obviously, you know, we are pushing a particular image these days, but we do need to be really clear on what, like I said, on what the costs are. So, like I said before, I'm not really firing on all cylinders today. I had a point there, and I've kind of lost it. Sorry. Don't spend anything on the first day would be my tip, my bit of advice.
Yeah, or the second day.
Or indeed that week. I mean, it's what you said before about jobs. I mean, I think that there is a piece of work to do around what work students would and would not like to undertake, because we do get some students who unfortunately now say, well, but I don't want to do that. And it's like, that's absolutely fine. You may not want to do that, but actually it's good work, it's well paid, and actually you may not have many other options at the moment in terms of, but you know, there's no shame in part-time work. I think sometimes there is some kind of embarrassment, people might say now, about having to undertake extra part-time work to fund their studies, and that's not the case. I mean, Lynne knows this. I used to do the death notices at the local paper, and it was a great job because nobody else wanted to do it, and it was really well paid. But I think that sometimes people say, "Oh, I don't want to do 8 hours on a shop floor."
Yeah.
Can I just Lynne, may I jump in on that? Because I think it's a really important point as well, is that encouraging young people to work at uni is not just about the fact that they get the money. I say this as somebody who's currently trying to fill 3 roles at Blackbullion, and we are really struggling with the quality of candidates. There is a real question around university work, and the skills that you gain from retail, from working in hospitality, are unbelievably useful lifelong employability skills. The things that people fall down on is things like timekeeping and working as a team and being committed. And we need to sell, if you'll forgive me, we need to sell part-time work at uni as also being a step on the career ladder. It's not a stick, it's a carrot. And we need to, like I believe with so many things, we simply need to change the narrative. The truth is, I would imagine most people in this room worked to some degree while they were at university. I worked at McDonald's for 5 years. It is absolutely one of the most pivotal employment moments in my life, because that's when I learned how to deal with people and how to deal with money and all of that extra stuff. And so it needs to be much more of a carrot than a stick. You have to work. This is the real world. If you don't want to do that, you have to move to Bali and, you know, become a digital nomad and make £10 a day, and that's what you live in. That's fine. That's a choice. But life comes with work. And this is where I think mollycoddling young people is very much to their detriment. I think if you don't have enough money, you have to get a job. The problem is when, as our surveys are showing, when you've got high percentage numbers of students doing 2 jobs and 3 jobs and 4 jobs, that's when it's a problem. But no one's going to get sympathy for students if we say that students are working 10 hours part-time during the week. So they should be. That's a great thing. It's a positive thing. Let's spin it that way. Sorry. Yeah,
absolutely. No, don't be sorry, because actually it's certainly a soapbox that I've stood on many times, if we're allowed to call it a soapbox still, that we should be talking about the benefits of working as opposed to it being detriment to your studies, obviously with the caveat that you shouldn't really work more than 15 hours a week, which is great. And like you say, it's all those life skills as well as the money. And yeah, all right, it's the minimum. And the other thing that we used to say, going back to Dom's point, is that you will make a whole new group of friends, which is how we used to sell it to a lot of students that we worked with, is that you've got different friends with different interests. And actually that's great, because it's a bit of an anchor, isn't it, in your university town or city. You've got your classmates, might have your halls mates, and this is another group of people that you can connect with. And between those 3 groups, hopefully you will find some people that you have stuff in common with. So there's definitely that. And I had the best job ever. Phil, I definitely trump your death notice, don't I? Phil knows my best job ever is I
Which one? Is it the fish factory, or when you were selling homemade leg warmers? Because there's a couple.
Well, I have had a couple of jobs. The fish finger factory was definitely one of the high points in my life. And do you know what? It was good money. It was good money, and I met some interesting people, and I definitely learned some life skills, definitely. So we'll talk about the leg warmers another day. Okay, on with the questions. So I have got absolutely loads of questions. I think, how are we doing for time? Let's pick another one out, and then maybe we'll see if people on the chat have got any questions. Okay, what are some of the most effective ways for university support staff to communicate information about scholarships, grants, bursaries? It's so complicated, isn't it? You've statutory support, you've got these other things that I know, Vivi, we're talking a bit about scholarships, we talk about bursaries, you've got all these other pockets of money, hardship funds, you know. What are the best ways to communicate this information effectively? And what do you think, when do you think is the right time to talk about all of these? Phil, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I think first off, we need to not assume that everybody understands what a scholarship and a bursary and a grant and a maintenance loan are, because students don't, young people don't do they. So I think that's the first thing, is that we need to be really clear on, there's lots of different pots of money, and this is what they are called. These are the terms that you're going to hear, because I mean, you know, there's a wider piece there, isn't there, about, you know, like understanding your bank accounts and stuff like that. But we use language within the sector that we expect young people to understand, and sometimes they don't. So I think we need to be really clear on that. I mean, we've certainly seen a massive shift in how we communicate with students. Our comms team now do all kinds of weird and wonderful things with TikTok and Instagram and stuff like that, which I don't profess to understand, but I don't work in marketing, so that's okay for me. But I think that, again, but there's also a piece of work about dispelling the myths, because, I mean, when we had an open day recently, and some students saying, but I don't want to apply for a scholarship either because I'm not clever enough, or because it might be seen as a handout as well. So there's a whole bit of unpacking to do there, I think, about this additional money which students will really benefit from.
Thanks, Phil. Dom, have you got any thoughts about good ways to communicate this to applicants and or parents, maybe?
Yeah, I have got a couple of thoughts. I'm really struck by some of the themes that are coming out. It feels like we need to destigmatize getting a job or not having money. And yet, as a student, I mean, the word student has always been associated with being poor. I mean, it literally is poor students. And certainly through I came in the late 80s and the 90s, nobody expected you to have loads of money. Yeah, there were always a few flash ones who turned up on day one in their BMW, but they were the real odd ones out. It's really striking me that we seem to have to be doing some work around this sort of destigmatizing, for want of a better word, that getting a job is a good thing and earning money is okay. And I know there are loads who are doing 3 or 4 jobs, so I'm well aware of that, but it just sounds like there's another bit of work there, isn't there? I was struck also by the comment in the chat that there were some students who said, well, they're only going to do work if it relates to their course. Now, I get that could be because they're being way too selective and unrealistic, but also as a GP, I would hear students say, I'm not joining any clubs or societies, even though I was trying to encourage them to do that, to meet people and have a support network and so on. I'm not doing that unless it's good for my CV. And the reason was that they were so focused on, you know, getting the degree, getting a first, getting into the workplace and having everything for the CV, that they wouldn't entertain anything else. So I'll put that to one side, but it's interesting that there are some you know, more subtle themes here that we probably need to think about as well. I think getting the word out, how to communicate with young people, with students, with demographics like that. Well, it's always other people, isn't it? I mean, word of mouth, peer influence again, students' union, and then possibly, you know, through their academic departments as well, which is the one, because of this drive to do well, that they will continue to engage with that even when they're not coming to wellbeing or welfare or help services. They will probably still turn up. You know, the academic stuff will be the last thing to go, kind of thing. So, and I know from speaking to academics recently in some of the reviews I've been doing, when I was trying to work out what went wrong with a student's story, perhaps not that anyone did anything wrong, but, you know, where did it go wrong? Where could have things been done differently? Some of the academics are the ones that were trying to support the student at a most day-to-day level, not that they were trained to, and they were saying this is, you know, well above what they would normally be expected to do, but they were the ones who the student came to saying that, for example, one young female student said to her tutor that she was considering taking up sex work, basically, because she didn't know where else to get money. And he said, do you know the university has hardship funds? No idea. So, you know, it sort of feels really simple to us and obvious that there's money out there and help and advice, but it isn't obvious to students, and they will possibly do you know, more risky things because they didn't realize. So I do think, you know, word of mouth, peer influence, students and other students telling each other that there's help via perhaps some of the academic departments may be another way to get it.
Thanks. Vivi, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all of that. I think the sex work is a really interesting one because we know that on mute, apparently. My computer is telling me I'm on mute, but I don't seem to be on mute. So I don't know what's going on there. I was saying what I think is interesting about the sex work in particular is we know that that's accelerating. The number of people who are using it, male and female, is going up quite a lot. because things like OnlyFans is a lot more hidden and has this aura of you can make a lot of money, when actually the reality is the average person they would make more working at a coffee shop. So it's really interesting about that. I 100 million% concur with, we need to make sure that young people know that funding is there. It doesn't always mean they're going to be able to reach it. But again, when funds are spread out throughout the university and support is in one place and academic is in another place and different academics are in a different place, it's just not, students unfortunately are just not going to hunt around and find it. It needs to be centralized. It needs to be well advertised. That is and I know somebody earlier said, if only marketing and understood student support better, and I concur. But this is ultimately this is a marketing question, is how do you just get that word out? I think what Phil said about the language around scholarships and bursaries is very interesting. Bursaries and scholarships have been at the absolute core of financial services in the United States for decades. Now, the US has a very different, God help us if we ever get there, funding system. But the corporate America is much more engaged in academic America in a way that we simply don't have here. So anyone who was at the workshop would have heard the statistic. In the US, there's 180 billion with a B dollars worth of scholarships and bursaries. Yeah. And in the UK, it's 2 million. And so that difference is enormous. And so when we bought the Scholarship Hub last year, and we've brought somebody on to run it who is American, and for that I apologize, the appetite actually is there for corporates. It actually is there to do this. They just didn't know that they could because it's never been part of our culture. And the destigmatizing of applying for money, this money is actually not as interesting to the students as the internships and opportunities for graduate programs that come at the end. So we did a survey through the Scholarship Hub with students. Would you rather get £5,000 a year or £3,000 and an internship? And 100% said £3,000 in the internship. So again, it's shifting that language and shifting the understanding of what this money is. And the more money is there, and it's not just academics, it is disadvantaged groups, it is underrepresented, it is specific courses, but we have companies like Wise and the banks and engineering companies that are putting these monies out. So that is a marketing job from our side, and we would then urge you to encourage your students to look for these funds, because they are starting to grow and starting to be out there. Again, I just think we need to also be honest with students that sometimes you have to do the work. That's just the reality. And everything is good for your CV. That's a careers failure, because the soft skills as an employer are more important than the hard skills. Anyone in this room could learn how to code. Don't tell our engineers that, but anyone can learn how to code. Not everyone can learn how to work well with others. And so the soft skills are absolutely crucial, and that you learn at 15 working for £1.70 an hour at a pharmacy, which apparently Dimple did. So,
You win, Dimple. That definitely, if there's a prize, we'll check at the end to see if anyone's beat you. I do think around the scholarship, I mean, what Phil said is very true. I mean, what everyone said is very true around the terminology. I do think there's a bit of gatekeeping does go on at institutions around spending hardship money, and obviously not the people that come to these webinars, because the people that come to these webinars always want to find out more how to do things better. And but sometimes you think, this student really needs money. You apply a formula to their application, they're not going to come out with any money. Sorry, we can't help you. The computer says no. So there's definitely work to be done by the wider sector around supporting students, even if it means supporting them in the short term till they get paid, whether that be a payday or their student finance drop. So there's definitely lots of stuff to be done. And I know when I worked at JMU, we were always getting asked by companies about scholarships, internships, and I think it's coordinating it and centralising it, like you say, Vivi, so that again, it's back to that whole university approach of doing things, rather than the School of Law having money, the School of Engineering having money. And I'm not saying they shouldn't have their own money, but until you centralise it, students can't see what a great offer there is across the whole piece. And because it could be someone from the School of Science wants to do something in engineering in the future. So I'm very conscious of the time, so 22. So I suppose for a final thought about how universities can collaborate better with themselves. So obviously it'd be great if they could collaborate with each other, but let's collaborate with ourselves to start with. Who wants to start with that? Just a very quick thought, and I'll just check if there's anything online. Vivi, go on, because you're in the middle of the screen. You can go first.
I mean, speaking on the business side of things, I think that we can all get together within a single institution. I think there has to be the will and the driver to do it. But I also know universities are very different. I've worked in financial services and I've worked in startups. And so I know universities are very different beasts, but everyone wins, every department wins if there is a more holistic view of certain things that relate to students. Students are not a sum of their parts. So there's no point having mental health over here and finance over here and accommodation over here. We have to bring stuff together. But I also know that that's a little bit of wishful thinking because universities have their own idiosyncrasy. So I'm going to defer to the experts on this. But if we can ever help in anything, please give us a shout on that. We'd love to see it.
Dom, have you got a thought on the universities working collaboratively? I'm sure as the GP for a student health centre, you've loads of ideas about collaborative working from a health perspective. Can we apply them to money?
Yes, I mean, undoubtedly, it's about becoming familiar and understanding each other's work. I think some of the biggest issues, so taking the health and applying it across, you know, GPs, for example, many don't really understand what it is that counselling services do and don't offer, for example. So the minute they might hear a student is a student, oh, we'll just go back to your counselling service and not recognise that that team won't provide a specific type of therapy or for more than, you know, a certain number of sessions or whatever, you know, that it's understanding each other's jobs that can really help break down some of those barriers and therefore how you can help each other, and that actually you're all trying to do the same thing and you can help each other make each other's jobs better and easier. And one of the things that struck me, I can't remember where it was, but I read a study about this, specifically about GPs, but it said, you know, if you want to get GPs to change something that they're doing in their daily life, how do you do it? And people were saying, you know, do you think it's going to be mainly pay them more to do it, or is it make their job easier, or is the outcome, you know, if you make the outcomes better for patients? I mean, actually, people always think it's money. Money came last. If you can make it the outcome better for the patients and make their own working day easier, those are the things that will get change done. So I should think that it's the same in universities. If you can make the outcome better for the students and your own working day is easier by communicating with others and understanding what you're all doing, those are going to be the drivers for any kind of collaborative working and change.
Yeah, good point, actually. Phil, have you got a thought? Final thought?
Always. I mean, internally, we all do have, you know, that carrot now, don't we? Well, the stick, actually, in terms of our access and participation plans. It's not just about, you know, say, for example, students with a protected characteristic. If we look at some of the, you know, students from particular polar groups and stuff like that, that actually, these are institutional plans that we've made a commitment to. So we have made an institutional commitment to support students from these really diverse cohorts. And so I think that when there is not resistance or there is friction in terms of some departments collaborating together, or in terms of that holistic approach, that actually this is what we're mandated to do now. And I think that, I mean, certainly it's not an issue at my institution, and I would hope that isn't for colleagues in other institutions either, but this is something that this is our bread and butter now, actually, and it should be a really good, I'm not going to say carrot, it should be a really good stick to beat people with if they don't want to get involved in it, basically. But I'm not threatening, I'm not advocating for violence against difficult colleagues.
Interestingly, before you started talking, I wrote down our APP on my. So we've still got one mind, Phil, even though we haven't worked together for 2 years. So I'm glad we've kept that. I mean, you're right about the APP, and it's a pity the OFS are not more explicit about finance being linked to well-being, isn't it? I mean, because that would really be the catalyst for change across institutions.
Yeah, I mean, we've just done we are in the middle of doing a review of the governance of our APP, because it was really nebulous. There's lots and lots of different people involved in lots and lots of different committee structures, but like I say, that holistic approach to, if a student is from a low socioeconomic group and they've not had the right advice in terms of money support, whatever it might be, and then their access and wellbeing services, and this, and then they're at risk of disengaging, then actually that if we can coordinate that, like I say, and do it in a more joined up and holistic way, then actually it benefits everybody, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
You got me on my pet subject now, so I'm going to start.
Yeah, okay. So it's 11:28. Vivi, do you want to come back on and thank people? I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I hope that's been interesting. There's been a lot of chat. As always, all of this will be put together by the team and will be sent out of the newsletter. So if you get the newsletter, you'll have all of those summaries. Some really interesting jobs have been listed there, some interesting challenges for all of us, and some that I'm hoping that we at Blackbullion will be able to support with. So please let us know if there's anything that we can do. We have got a bonus webinar, and I'm just quickly going to, somebody just posted it. A bonus webinar, I think on the 25th, they did just tell me, a bonus webinar on the 25th of July with the SLC talking about the lifelong loan entitlement. I've got an issue with a loan being entitlement, but that's just me being a little bit whatever about the language. But it is a bonus session on the 25th of July. Please do make sure that you sign up for that if it's of interest. A lot of people have mentioned the app. We are going to be doing a special app launch specifically for our community members, so keep an eye out for that. The app will be broadly available, but we'll be doing a special launch for our people first. So if you're not one of our people and you want to be one of our people, let us know. We know these are tough times on campus at the moment with some of the strikes that are going on, with all of the other nonsense. We will get through this. We've gotten through everything else. We'll get through this recession. We've gotten through everything else. Keep your chins up, because if students see us all being anxious and worried and nervous, that's only going to filter through. If you need some optimism, drop me a message. I'll bring you back up again. I might drive you crazy, but I'll bring you back up again. But wishing you all a fabulous and fantastic day. We'll see you on the 25th. If you need anything in the meantime, around funds management, around applications, around scholarships and bursaries, please drop us a note. Lynn, as always, you are awesome. We'll see some of you at NASMA. We'll see some of you at Amoshi. We'll see all of you again soon. Have a fabulous afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.